here back, and kol hakavod for the work that you do in Woodges. Really, it's remarkable. Ophir Dayan, it's your turn. You studied in Columbia for 2 or 3 years?
5.
5 years?
Yeah.
Wow, so it's after 5 years coming back, it's not easy, I know, and getting used to back to the...
It's the easiest decision I made in my life.
After 3 years of shlichut, I remember that it wasn't...
Easiest move I made in my entire life. I couldn't wait to be back.
Kol hakavod, kol hakavod. It's only because her 2 parents are here, so
That's
she's...
true. Well, listen, I'm an only child, and my parents are Ashkenazi, so of course they're here.
Yeah. Ophir, we all saw the things that you were able to create in Colombia, and thank you for that. Do you feel that it was more an issue of Israelis or American Jews, American students also were part of the things that you led?
Okay, so first of all, thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, I think I'm going to disappoint you with my answer. Israelis at Columbia at my time were almost uninvolved in everything pro-Israel happening on campus. I think it's important to understand the mentality of some of the Israelis who attend Ivy League universities. These are pretty affluent Israelis who arrive there, and their goal in life is to make it to Wall Street. They have no intention of coming back home. Out of 40 people, I think I'm the only one who came back. Yeah, I know. Some of them came back for reserves in the army, which is highly appreciated, but I think I'm the only one who came back to live in Israel for good.
From your entire class there? From the cohort that you
Yeah,
knew
we
there?
were 40 Israelis in all 4 years of undergrad. And I think me and one other person, like 2 of my friends who made Aliyah weren't Israeli before, but out of the Israelis, I'm the only one who came back, yeah.
Wow. Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, and I think it's important to understand, in order to address this problem, it's important to understand where it's coming from. I think these people are attending these universities with the hopes of being as American as they can. They want to date the most un-Israeli girls and eat at the most unkosher restaurants and make it to Wall Street. And I want to, connect to something you said, that it's about being proud. And we didn't do a good enough job in making being a Zionist, being an Israeli, something to be proud of. I think these people in particular, but even more broadly, Israel offers all the opportunities, almost all the opportunities that the United States has to offer today. And, people attending Columbia, I think they have very, very good reasons to come back here. They'll be in the elite of society in Israel, hopefully. And for me, it's a failure on our side to not be able to bring them back. I would say one other thing, though, that is very important to me to say, and it's not necessarily connected directly to campuses, but I think it's also important to mention the very disturbing phenomena of Israelis who move to the States to work for Israel in Israeli consulates and embassies and end up staying there. I think that's a huge issue as well. The issue that people are sent to represent Israel and then they end up staying there. I think that's an issue that Israel has to address.
It's a serious phenomenon? You see it in vast numbers?
Well, let's say it this way. I had 2 very close friends who did that, and 2 of them stayed.
Again,
I had 2 very good friends from home who moved there to work, to New York, and both of them are still there.
Yes, but they worked at the consulate, or
Yes.
they were shlichim of the Jewish agency? What kind of capacity?
They were working on behalf of Israel.
Really?
Yes. And I think it's something that is very important to mention, because in the end of the day, if we can't retain the people who really believe in Zionism, who moved all the way across the world to promote Zionism, we have an issue. We have an issue, definitely, on that. Although I must tell you that the numbers that we have here in the national institutions from our shlichim are not that depressing at all. That's good.
Okay, so it's nice to know, but definitely it is a phenomenon if you evidently saw it. Ophir, the connections that you had with other colleagues, Israelis on campus, so they were not part of that organization. Jewish American students, did you find an interest with them?
So I do want to say, I think when we look at studies like this, obviously you know, it's a rather depressing image that comes out, and we look at the news and it's a pretty depressing image that comes out as well. But I do want to say there are hundreds and thousands of really, really brave, determined young American Jews and Israelis, and to my surprise, non-Jews who want to fight for Israel's name on college campuses. They are determined to do this to the best of their ability, even at the risk of, you know, losing some social status or you know, feeling uncomfortable on campus. I would want to say, though, something else. Look, I know that when we look at Jews and pro-Israel students on campus, we want to say, you know, be as loud, as proud as you can. That's not the only way to be pro-Israel on campus. I think it's super important to also empower the people who can't or won't be as loud as myself, for example. I'm a very loud person. That's just the way I am. But I had many friends who weren't as comfortable being on the front lines, and they had a lot of job to be done. And I want to mention just one of them because I think it's a really inspiring story. One of my best friends in the whole wide world is my best friend from Colombia. His Bengali students. He's Bengali, his country does not recognize Israel. On his passport it says, you know, admissible to all countries of the world except Israel. This person was on my board for Students Supporting Israel for 4 years at Columbia. He has nothing to do with Israel. He studies physics and computer science, and he's now getting his PhD in Princeton. That's exactly the kind of people we need on our side. And he, you know, just he's a very smart person and started reading and got interested with academic achievements by Israelis and came to one of our events and asked questions and just stayed. And he was one of my best advocates in Students Supporting Israel. And it's not just that he didn't want to, he couldn't expose who he was because his family is in Bangladesh, a Muslim country that would punish his family, his mother and his brother who are still there. And he was super effective without being identified with SSI. And this is something that can happen. And I think those are also people that we need to talk about. They exist.
You were in Colombia before October 7th, of course.
Yes.
You were there during the judicial reform in Israel?
No, I was there from 2017 until 2022.
Okay, so you were there when we didn't have this wave of anti-Semitism after October 7th, but Israel dealt with the more, I would say, routine challenges of hasbara.
Yes.
So one of the big issues that today, after post-October 7th, it got a different perspective, but back then for sure it was, is how Israel is dealing from a human rights perspective for the fact that it's governing more than 2 or 3 million Palestinians who do not want to be governed by Israel. That's an issue of hasbara that is not connected necessarily to anti-Semitism. This criticism is something that is legit, I would imagine, in your eyes.
Yes, it's totally legitimate. Look, I am not one of the people to say that, you know, everything contrary to the Israeli government is anti-Semitic. That's not true. I also have a lot of criticisms of the Israeli government from the right sometimes, and sometimes from the left, and that's okay. And it's totally okay.
When you do that, I give you a like.
From the right, you don't. I saw you not liking my Temple Mount tweets. Don't worry. But look, it's completely legitimate to criticize Israel, but it is important to say, look, and the great Natan Sharansky said it, when you delegitimize someone, when you dehumanize them, and when you have double standards, the 3 Ds, that's when you know it's anti-Semitic. And let me tell you how I experienced it at Columbia. It's one thing to say, you know, this and this action in Judea and Samaria was wrong. It's not okay to say, you don't deserve a country, an independent state, because you're Jewish. Every other nation in the world, including the Palestinians, deserve a national state of their own, an independent state, but you don't. And that's anti-Semitic. And I think sometimes the people criticizing Israel, they mix this up. They say, you know what, the Palestinians deserve an independent state, but you don't. And that's double standards.
Definitely. Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove of Park Avenue Synagogue, I think in one of her sermons after October 7th, he says something that, a good quote, when you seize, and he says, as an American Jew, when you seize my right to exist, the IDF speaks for me. חתיכת משפט. חברים, we'll open now for questions and remarks.
I'll respond shortly. Look, I think Birthright is one of the most amazing projects the Jewish people had in the last few decades. However, if I could add something to Birthright, and I think that's very, very critical, when Jewish students come to campuses, not all of them, but this is something I encountered on many occasions, is that they, even if they return from Birthright, what they saw of Israel, and by no means disrespecting, but what they saw is Masada, is the Dead Sea, it's Machne Yehuda, and they had a time of their lives, but they didn't speak about the real issues. And then when they come to campus and they faced with apartheid week and they see a huge wall and they tell them apartheid and it tell them ethnic cleansing and they're like, oh no, I saw a great jachnun in Machne Yehuda, that's not a response. And I think what needs to happen, I don't know if necessarily in Birthright, because Birthright has its own goal of enhancing closeness to Israel and to one's Jewish identity. But I think what's missing is not only speaking about Israel, and I know sometimes we don't like to hear that, but we need to speak about the fact that Israel is not perfect and teach those children, when they're not birthright age, even before that, how to face the difficult questions. And not just to their peers at universities, but to themselves. Because I saw many students who, arrived on campus and they heard apartheid and they heard ethnic cleansing and they're like, wait, someone lied to us for the last 18 years and now we went the other way and joined JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, who, spoiler alert, they're not pro-peace. But I think it's really important to mention that, knowledge is missing. And even in a world like today, when knowledge is only like 20% and narratives are 80, it still matters and they still need to know the facts. Question you back. Why would they be involved? Why would they? They have nothing to do with Israel. They have no interest in doing this. And to be honest, I don't feel like we as a collective encourage them to be involved. And I'm gonna, probably my parents heard me give this elevator pitch like 2,000 times, but I'm gonna do it again. And the story we're telling them on campus is just not the right story, because specifically I'll say at Columbia, which is a very, very, very liberal school, what people care about is human rights, is intersectionality, it's justice. And they don't care about high tech, they don't care about cherry tomatoes, and they definitely don't care about waste because nobody uses it in the States and it doesn't work in New York because of the high buildings. So I wanna offer you a 30-second speech of what we should tell Jews and non-Jews, specifically non-Jews, to get them involved or at least, to listen to us. So what we need to tell them is not out of the blue. It's the true story of the Jewish people, okay? And it goes like this. The story of the Jewish people is a story of 1,000 years old native population, indigenous population in its land. And this indigenous population was kicked out by European colonizers who subjugated it for 2,000 years of brutality, of slavery, and at the height of it, of genocide. And after 2,000 years of all of this, they are the only nation on earth who managed to liberate itself, come back to its homeland, and reestablish its sovereignty in its homeland. And there is really nothing more progressive and more liberal than this story on a college campus. But this is a story we don't tell. We tell them about ways and about charity, and they're all great. And I'm not saying, and maybe at MIT they work wonderfully, I don't know. But at Columbia and in Berkeley and in places like this, they just don't work. And we need to tell our story. And I know that we're in a hurry, but I'm just gonna say one last thing. And really, I feel like I'm saying it a lot, but no disrespect. We didn't wait 2,000 years for the Azrieli Center or for Sarona, okay? We just didn't. We waited 2,000 years for Jerusalem, okay? And if we don't say
also
that...
Also for Tel Aviv. I differ.
Maybe you, I don't know.
Maybe the two universities of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, but definitely Tel Aviv.
But we're not here in Israel in order to be the startup nation. We're here in Israel to revive Jewish sovereignty in our land, and if we don't say that, we sin and we lose non-Jews, because when it's a story of national liberation, it can also be their story. And it was the story for my good friend in Colombia who's Native American, and she could totally relate to my story because that's how I told it. And I know, one last thing, really last. Look, and when you say this story, you can have any opinion you want. You can be pro 1 state, 2 state, 4 states. I'm not taking an opinion. You can believe that we need to divide Israel and give half of it to the Palestinians in order to achieve peace, but knowing that it's ours to give up. It's our decision because it's our homeland, and now we can negotiate it. I disagree, but that's a whole different issue, which really doesn't matter. So thank you, everyone. I'll address your question for a tip. I would say 2 tips. First of all, know your stuff. And second of all, choose your way of doing things. And I know it sounds snowflakey and very Gen Z and like very up in the air, but I want to go back to what we spoke about. You need to do it how you want to advocate for Israel. It's unauthentic, and I would even say in that regard, if you don't feel comfortable working with certain groups, just don't. And briefly, to this gentleman who asked about whether it's organized or not, yes, definitely. I don't think everything is organized, but definitely organized, some of it. I'll just give one brief example. At Columbia, there is a Middle East Institute. Okay, there's a Jewish and Israel Institute, because the Middle East Institute didn't want Israel and Jewish studies to be included. And then there's a Palestine Institute. There's no Saudi Arabia Institute, there's no Iraqi, but there's a Palestine Institute. Guess who funds it? I'm not going to say, just Google it, it's all there. And this institute does not teach classes. What they do is that they do events after hours. And they host events with SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine. So you see a tenured professor standing on stage and thanking SJP students for hosting the events with them. And definitely funded, yes. And sorry, Ishar, just one thing, I think, since it's funded, Israel has a lot to do with it. Students can deal with advocacy on campus because they know their campus and they know their peers. Students can't chase the money in international courts, and with the administrations, and that's where the state has more power and an advantage.
Thank you.